Chuck Connors managed to fool America for nearly 30 years. To millions of television viewers, he was the perfect image of a strong, fearless cowboy. He stood an impressive 6 feet 5 inches tall, had a deep voice, broad shoulders, and a calm but powerful presence that made him seem larger than life. On screen, he looked like a man who had nothing to hide. But behind that confident image, he was keeping a secret that very few people ever knew. In 1963, while working on a film set, a makeup artist accidentally discovered the truth while preparing him for a scene. What she saw explained why Connors spent an estimated $50,000 a year on his appearance. She was sworn to secrecy and kept quiet for decades. For 30 years, audiences watched him week after week without knowing what was really under his hat. When he died in 1992, his family opened a personal safe and found a single hidden photograph. The picture showed Chuck Connors without his disguise, finally revealing the truth he had worked so hard to conceal. The man who played Hollywood's toughest cowboy had been living a carefully protected lie. Chuck Connors was born Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors on April 10, 1921, in Brooklyn, New York. His parents, Alban and Marcella Connors, had immigrated from Newfoundland in search of a more stable life in America. Like many families of that time, they arrived with hope, but their dreams were quickly challenged by the Great Depression. Work was hard to find and money was always tight. Alban worked long hours hauling cargo at the docks, doing exhausting physical labor for little pay. Marcella took on any small job she could find to help support the family. Despite their efforts, bills piled up and savings were almost impossible. Still, inside their small home, there was structure, faith, and love. They held on to routines, church, and each other to survive the difficult years. Chuck grew up alongside his younger sister, Gloria. The family regularly attended Our Lady of Perpetual Help Basilica, where the local community leaned on one another during hard times. Even as a child, Chuck stood out. He was taller than most boys his age and showed natural athletic ability. Sports became his escape and his hope for something better. At just 17, his talent earned him a scholarship to Adelphi Academy, a prep school far removed from the crowded streets of Brooklyn. It felt like stepping into a different world. There, he played baseball for the Bay Ridge Celtics, a semi-professional team. His performances started turning heads, and people around the borough began whispering his name. Though his family continued to struggle financially, Chuck's success on the field gave them hope. He seemed like someone who might escape the cycle of hard labor that trapped so many families around them. While attending Adelphi, he continued to grow, eventually reaching his full height of 6'5". His size combined with smooth coordination made him impossible to ignore. Coaches and scouts noticed, and soon more than 24 colleges showed interest in him. He chose Seton Hall University, where his athletic career truly took off. Within months, he became a standout in both basketball and baseball. Stories about his scoring, rebounding, and raw power spread quickly. By 1939, at just 18 years old, he was already a local celebrity. It was also at Seton Hall where he picked up the nickname that would stay with him forever. During games, he often shouted "Chuck it to me," asking teammates for the ball. Before long, everyone simply called him Chuck. The name stuck, following him into every stage of his life. His size, strength, and determination made him unforgettable long before he ever thought about acting. In October 1942, with World War II underway, Chuck enlisted in the United States Army. He was 21 and ready to serve. He trained at Fort Knox and Fort Campbell before being stationed at West Point, where he became a tank warfare instructor. Even while serving, his competitive spirit never slowed down. On weekends, he played semi-professional baseball in Brooklyn. During winters, he joined professional basketball leagues in the New York area. He averaged 6.1 points per game for the Wilmington Bombers and 8.8 points for the Patterson Crescents. Even during wartime, he proved he could compete at a high level. After being discharged in February 1946, Chuck joined the newly formed Boston Celtics. During his time there, he made history by becoming the first NBA player to shatter a backboard, a moment that symbolized his raw power. Still, despite these achievements, he felt restless. Deep down, He believed his talents deserved bigger stages and brighter lights. That hunger followed him into baseball, where he continued to chase success. The New York Yankees had signed him back in 1942, and he played 72 games for the Norfolk Tars, batting .264. After the war, he attended spring training with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1948 but failed to make the roster. He spent 2 years playing for their minor league team in Montreal before finally making his Major League Baseball debut in 1949. It lasted just one game. One at-bat. Then it was over. In 1951, he joined the Chicago Cubs and appeared in 66 games, hitting .239 with 2 home runs and 18 RBIs. Meanwhile, in the minor leagues with the Los Angeles Angels, he hit 22 home runs and drove in 77 runs. Despite strong performances, he was never more than a role player at the major league level. These near misses weighed heavily on him. Time and again, he came close to stardom, only to watch others pass him by. Teammates became stars while he packed his bags for another minor league city. The frustration settled deep inside him and shaped his personality. He became more guarded, more demanding, and sometimes pushed people away. He wanted respect. He wanted his name to matter. That burning desire, fueled by disappointment, would later drive him in Hollywood. By 1952, Chuck was 31 years old and still chasing a baseball dream that was slipping away. Many athletes would have retired, but instead, he found himself backed into a corner. He knew his major league career was over. He had to reinvent himself or fade into obscurity. That was when life took an unexpected turn. While playing baseball in Los Angeles, he caught the eye of a casting director who was struck by his height, strong jawline, and commanding presence. The director approached him with an offer to appear in the film Pat and Mike, starring Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. Chuck had never acted before, but he said yes. That decision changed everything. Acting felt right in a way baseball no longer did. It gave him a new sense of purpose. He began landing small roles, often cast as tough or intimidating characters. His rugged look and quiet confidence worked in his favor. In 1957, his role in Old Yeller left a strong impression on audiences and producers alike. From there, his career gained momentum. He appeared in westerns and dramas, relying on instinct rather than formal training. Hollywood liked his natural style and kept calling him back. As his fame grew, so did his ego. Years of being overlooked made him unwilling to blend into the background. This sometimes caused tension on set, but it also pushed him to give every role his full intensity. His biggest break came in 1958 with The Rifleman. At first, he turned down the role of Lucas McCain because the pay was lower than what he was earning as a freelance actor. After seeing his performance in Old Yeller, the producers returned with a better offer, including higher pay and a 5% ownership stake. He eventually earned about $3,000 per episode, which would be worth much more today. Lucas McCain became one of television's first single fathers, a widower raising his son in the American frontier. He was strong yet gentle, moral yet deadly with a rifle. Audiences loved the balance. When the show premiered on September 30, 1958, it quickly became a hit, drawing millions of viewers and ranking near the top of the ratings. Families connected with the realistic bond between father and son. Merchandise exploded, and Chuck Connors became a household name. Behind the scenes, Chuck formed a close bond with Johnny Crawford, who played his son. He guided the young actor, offering advice about discipline and staying grounded. Their real-life connection made their on-screen relationship feel genuine. But off-camera, Chuck lived very differently. Fame brought parties, affairs, and broken relationships. He cheated openly, and his marriage eventually collapsed in 1961. Fans who admired his wholesome image were shocked when they learned the truth about his personal life. The contrast between Lucas McCain and Chuck Connors forced many to reconsider the man they thought they knew. Chuck Connors had married Elizabeth Betty Riddell on October 1, 1948, after meeting her at a baseball game in Montreal. At the time, life felt full of promise. He was young and driven, and she came from a comfortable background. But fame, temptation, and his restless nature slowly pulled them apart. Despite his success, Chuck Connors remained a man shaped by insecurity, ambition, and a secret he guarded until the very end. Their life together looked stable and calm from the outside. Before long, they welcomed 4 sons into the world. Michael was born in 1950, followed by Jeffrey in 1952, Stephen in 1953, and Kevin in 1956. In photographs from those early years, Betty often appears smiling warmly, while Chuck stands tall beside his boys, looking confident and in control. Their home in Los Angeles felt far removed from the restless ballparks and long road trips that once defined Chuck's life. For a while, they truly seemed like the picture of a happy, complete family. Friends and fans believed they had found balance, and for a brief time, that image felt real. Everything began to change in 1958 when The Rifleman entered Chuck's life. The success of the show brought fame, money, and admiration, but it also brought long hours and growing distance. Filming was intense and demanding. Over 5 years, Chuck worked on 168 episodes, often spending nearly every day on set. 12-hour shooting days were common, followed by long drives home that left him drained and quiet. His sons later remembered moments that passed without him, birthdays, school events, and ordinary family memories where his presence was missing. Betty was left to manage the household on her own, raising 4 young boys while her husband's career consumed him. People who worked with Chuck noticed that he rarely spoke about his family. On set, he was charming, focused, and professional, but there was an emotional distance about him. As The Rifleman climbed into the top 10 television shows by 1959, his fame grew rapidly. With that rise, the gap between his public life and private life grew wider. At home, the pressure quietly built. Betty carried the weight of daily responsibilities alone, while Chuck became increasingly absorbed in his work and the attention that came with it. By the late 1950s, whispers began to circulate. Rumors of Chuck's affairs drifted through studio hallways and social circles. Co-stars joked openly about his flirtations, and some said he did not seem concerned about being discreet. Actress Joan Crawford once remarked that he could charm almost anyone, but struggled to remain faithful. The rumors became harder to ignore in 1961, when Betty discovered clear evidence of an affair with a young actress. According to those close to the situation, it was not the first time. Many believed Chuck had been involved with multiple women over several years. Some even claimed he had fathered children during these secret relationships, though none of those claims were ever proven. Still, the damage was real. The rumors spread quickly through Hollywood and eventually made their way back into their home. By 1961, Betty had reached her limit. She confronted Chuck and soon after filed for divorce. 13 years of marriage unraveled, officially ending in 1962. In public, they remained respectful and calm, careful to protect their image. Behind closed doors, however, the situation was tense and painful. Some people claimed that Betty threatened to reveal everything she knew unless Chuck agreed to certain terms. By February 1962, the marriage was legally over, though emotionally it had been broken long before. The wholesome family image seen in magazines and interviews had already cracked under the weight of reality. For their sons, the consequences lasted far beyond the divorce. On television, Chuck played Lucas McCain, the ideal father, strong, caring, and always present for his child. At home, his boys experienced a very different version of him. Jeffrey later said that his father was always chasing excitement and thrills. That constant chase meant he was often emotionally distant and physically absent. The children saw his charm up close, but they also felt the coldness that came with it. Betty carried the burden of raising 4 boys while coping with betrayal and public scrutiny. As the years passed, the difference between Chuck's television persona and his real-life behavior became more obvious to everyone around them. Not long after the divorce, a new chapter began with Kamala Devi. She was an Indian-British actress, born in Bombay in 1933. Chuck met her in 1962 while filming Geronimo. On screen, they shared a natural chemistry that soon carried over into their personal lives. When they married on April 10, 1963, the relationship drew widespread attention. Interracial marriages were still rare in Hollywood at the time, and their union made headlines. Kamala's beauty, confidence, and intelligence made them stand out as a bold and modern couple. They appeared together frequently, including roles in Branded in 1965 and later in Cowboy in Africa between 1967 and 1968. Their partnership on television helped open small but meaningful doors for diversity in the industry. For a time, they appeared to be a powerful and progressive couple. However, behind the scenes, problems slowly surfaced. Camilla was educated, worldly, and ambitious. She hoped Chuck would expand beyond the cowboy roles that defined his career and take on more serious, challenging work. She encouraged him to explore new directions. Chuck, on the other hand, clung tightly to the image that had brought him fame. He worried that changing too much would cost him his audience. She felt unheard and frustrated, while he felt pressured and misunderstood. Their different visions created tension that quietly grew over time. Small disagreements slowly turned into emotional distance. As the gap widened, Chuck's old habits began to resurface. Once again, rumors of affairs followed him through the 1960s. Many believed his womanizing never truly stopped. Hollywood insiders noticed how quickly he seemed to move toward new relationships after conflicts or periods of separation. Camilla tried to keep the marriage together, balancing her own career while holding on to hope that things would improve. But the strain never eased. By 1972, their relationship had worn thin. Their final film together, The Proud and the Damned, was released that same year. The tension and conflict shown on screen mirrored the emotional weight they were carrying in real life. The marriage officially ended in divorce in 1973, closing nearly a decade of trying to balance love, ambition, and chaos. After their separation, Chuck's career began to slow. Camilla stepped away from the spotlight, choosing a quieter path. Their marriage remained a notable chapter in Hollywood history, remembered both for its courage and its heartbreak. That same year, while filming Soylent Green, Chuck met Faith Quabius. She was an actress who had previously worked as a Playboy bunny before entering films. They connected during the production, and their relationship developed quickly. 4 years later, in 1977, they married. Faith was much younger than Chuck, not even half his age, and the age difference became a frequent topic of gossip. The marriage lasted only 3 years, ending in April 1980. It marked Chuck's third failed marriage. Even devoted fans who admired him as Lucas McCain began to question why none of his relationships seemed to last. This breakup carried darker shadows than the previous ones. After the divorce, Faith accused Chuck of abusive behavior, claiming it was linked to his drinking and temper. Chuck firmly denied the allegations, but the accusations left a lasting mark. Over the years, people in the industry had quietly spoken about his angry outbursts and difficult behavior. No legal charges were ever filed, yet the claims added pressure to a reputation already strained by scandals, rumors, and a growing sense that the man behind the legend was far more complicated than the hero audiences believed him to be. People in Hollywood slowly began to describe Chuck Connors as untouchable. He carried himself like a man who believed the rules did not fully apply to him anymore. His fame gave him confidence, and sometimes that confidence crossed into arrogance. Even as he moved into his 50s, he continued chasing much younger women, behavior that made some people around him uncomfortable. A few actresses quietly refused to work with him, not because of his talent, but because of his reputation. Meanwhile, his children felt him slipping even farther away. Instead of focusing on repairing the damage left behind by divorce and distance, he poured his energy into his career and new relationships. There was always a fire inside him, and that fire drove nearly every decision he made, for better or worse. From early on, people in Hollywood learned that Chuck Connors was not a man who easily bent to pressure. In 1964, when many actors avoided political statements to protect their careers, he openly campaigned for Barry Goldwater. He stood on stages and spoke firmly about his belief in fighting communism. 3 years later, he marched in New York City to support the Vietnam War, saying that stopping communism overseas was necessary to protect America at home. Even when public opinion began to turn against these views, he did not back down. In 1968, he supported Richard Nixon without hesitation. Later, he became a strong supporter of Ronald Reagan, who eventually became a close personal friend. Connors attended fundraisers, spoke at political rallies, and even turned down an opportunity to run for Congress in 1972, believing he could have more influence without holding office. His actions made one thing clear. He believed deeply in his political views and was willing to risk his career to stand by them. That same fire, however, often clashed with the industry he worked in. By the late 1960s, Hollywood was changing. Many actors became more openly liberal and outspoken against the Vietnam War. Connors did not shy away from confrontation. He walked directly into debates that others avoided. While working on Soylent Green, he openly argued with Charlton Heston about the war. Connors told people he would rather lose a job than pretend to agree with opinions he did not believe in. Some producers began whispering that he was difficult to work with. Others quietly stopped offering him roles. He did not fit into the new wave of satire and self-criticism that Hollywood embraced. He refused to mock the cowboy image that made him famous. While the industry moved toward different stories and tones, Connors stayed firmly rooted in the values that shaped his career. As time passed, rumors began to circulate that he was being pushed aside. It was not an official blacklist, nothing written or openly admitted, but more of a slow disappearance from casting lists. Producers preferred actors who adapted to the changing times. Connors refused to adapt. He continued to speak openly about patriotism while others treated it as something outdated or ironic. Some believed his stubborn pride cost him major roles that later went to actors seen as safer choices. These claims were never fully proven, but they revealed how deep the tension had grown between Connors and the Hollywood culture around him. Then something surprising happened. As tensions from the Cold War began to ease, Connors joined American goodwill trips to the Soviet Union. He traveled to Moscow and even shook hands with Soviet leaders at the Kremlin. Reporters called him a cowboy ambassador. To many people, this seemed strange, considering his long history of strong anti-communist views. But Connors saw it differently. He believed defending American values also meant supporting peace when the time was right. His presence in the Soviet Union showed a side of him that many did not expect. He walked into those meetings with confidence, believing that strength and diplomacy could exist together. This shift added another layer to his already complex story. The same man who once fiercely opposed communism now supported cooperation between former enemies. After The Rifleman ended in 1963, his career continued, but in a different way. During the 1970s and 1980s, he appeared in countless television shows. He showed up in series like Night Gallery, The Virginian, and Fantasy Island. He became known as a reliable actor who could step into an episode and give it weight. He played recurring roles in Spencer for Hire in 1985 and later in the horror series Werewolf between 1987 and 1988. He also starred in many television movies, including The Guns of Will Sonnet and The Outcasts. None of these projects reached the cultural power of The Rifleman, but they kept him visible on screens across the country. Even in major films, such as Airplane 2 in 1982, he was often given smaller or humorous roles. No matter how many characters he played, audiences continued to see him as Lucas McCain. To them, he was always the quiet father with the rifle, the man who could command respect with a calm stare. That image followed him everywhere. But behind it, his body was slowly failing. Connors had smoked heavily for decades, and by the early 1990s, his lungs could no longer keep up. Doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer. His breathing became weaker, and pneumonia followed. In November 1992, he was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The cancer had spread too far, and treatment could no longer help. He had already undergone a thoracotomy, a painful surgery to remove part of his lung, but nothing stopped the disease. On November 10, 1992, Chuck Connors died at the age of 71. The man who once seemed unbreakable passed away quietly, shaped in the end by a habit he never gave up. After his death, his children spoke openly about what it was like growing up in his shadow. Kevin Connors said his father was often gone, either filming, traveling, or attending public events. Their mother handled most of the daily work of raising them. Even when Chuck was home, there were times when he felt emotionally distant. Fame had built a wall between him and his family, one he did not always know how to tear down. His children remembered his temper, the stress he carried, and the long silences. They struggled to connect with the same man America adored on television. Lucas McCain felt warm and steady. Chuck Connors often felt far away. Fans never saw that side of him. They held tightly to the image they loved. They watched reruns, collected photographs, and spoke of him as a symbol of honesty, strength, and family values. They did not see the multiple marriages or the divorces that filled newspaper headlines. They did not hear the accusations of infidelity or witness the chaos that followed him from one household to another. They did not feel the emotional distance that shaped his children's memories. Instead, they focused on the calm father figure in black and white, the man who always seemed to know the right thing to say. That gap between the image and the real man never truly closed. Chuck Connors built a legacy rooted in warmth and moral clarity, yet his real life was filled with struggle, regret, and difficult choices. His career slowly shifted from leading roles to guest appearances. His health collapsed after years of smoking. His family lived through pain that fans never imagined. The Rifleman continued to shine long after he was gone, but behind that glow was a man shaped by flaws and contradictions. This contrast is what makes his story so powerful. It forces us to question our love for nostalgia. We look back at old television shows and see a world that feels simple, filled with perfect fathers and unshakable heroes. But behind those characters were real people, carrying burdens that never made it onto the screen. Chuck Connors became a symbol of a time that never truly existed, a time created by scripts, lighting, and careful editing. His real life was messy and painful, filled with mistakes most audiences never wanted to imagine.